My sister didn't want my nephew, so I raised him as my son now, though my niece feels excluded and envious of him, though as my niece have always adored her. How can I explain that I treat them differently? When I 43F was 18, and when my sister 47, was 22F at the time, had my nephew, let's call him Luke, with her then Viv, now husband. My sister and her husband didn't have any interest in Luke when he was born, so I took the role of taking care of him. I got my grandmother, she's an angel, to watch him while I was in my last year of high school in exchange for me cleaning and cooking for her on the weekends. My parents weren't much help either. They would give me about $100 a month for Luke, and if you have a kid then you know it's not much. Me and my grandmother were the only ones to take care of him. A year after I graduated from high school I was kicked out with my nephew because my parents' sister and her husband didn't want to deal with us anymore. My sister said she wished she never gave birth to him. I immediately went to my grandmother, and we went to a family law attorney, and I got custody of him, and my sister and her husband signed the rights to me. I lived with my grandmother, and when I went to community college and my part-time job she watched my son, Luke. It was a lot of work, especially when my grandmother passed away when my son was 6. My grandmother left 90% of her things to me in her will, which caused my parents and sister to reach out to me under false intentions to meet my son and I to reconnect. That didn't last long, and I told them they could either act right or never see us again. My dad decided to actually reconnect with my son and I, and now we're close. While my mom and I don't really talk much, but she treats Luke nice. When Luke was 8, both me and my sister became pregnant. And that's when my sister decided she wanted my son back, and started to tell him that my husband wouldn't love him anymore once my actual son came along. My husband met my son when he was 5, and we were already together for a year before he met my son. My husband treats Luke like his, and we got married when my son was 7 and adopted him when he was 9, with my son's permission. We found out that my sister was saying this when one day he broke down crying, asking us not to leave him after we told him that would never happen. He explained what my sister and her husband were saying. Luke knows that he's not my biological son, but he is my son. After that I cut contact with my sister and her husband again and did family therapy and individual therapy for my son. When I had my son, 1 pregnancy, 2 children, I made it clear that our love for him, Luke, didn't change. When my sister reached out about 2 years later, I decided to go low contact with her with the okay with my son and husband. My husband and I live comfortably while my sister and her husband struggle sometimes financially. My kids did extracurricular activities, got the presents they wanted, and went on one big family trip in the summer, while my sister and her husband couldn't afford much. So when my niece was around 9, my sister started making comments about how I needed to pay for this, or that for my niece, but I told her it wasn't my job. I gave my niece the gifts she wanted, took her out from time to time, but nowhere near how I would treat my own kids. Now my son's 2nd, is turning 17, and my husband and I were talking about getting him a cheap starter car. We did the same for Luke when he was 17. My niece is also turning 17, and apparently my sister told her she was going to get a car too. The thing is, my sister can't afford to buy her a car, so she asked me to, but I told her I wasn't going to buy her a car, that I didn't promise her one, and that it's not my job to get her one. My sister then got mad, and didn't talk to me for a while. When my son's 17th birthday came around, we surprised him with a car. My niece then called me a couple of days later screaming and crying, asking me why I hate her, and why I can't treat her the same as her brother. I calmly told her things were different. Her brother is my son while she is my niece. I'm her aunt and nothing more. That as an aunt my job was birthday presents, Christmas presents, and showing up when it mattered. That was it. That her brother will always be more to me than she'll ever be. Then my niece started yelling at me again, telling me that I'm being unfair, and hung up. My sister then called me to berate me about how I need to do more. I told her if she wouldn't have promised a car to her, or my money to my niece, none of this wouldn't have happened. It's been a couple of days and I'm getting calls from some family and some of my sister's friends calling me a bitch and some other things. I do feel bad because my kids did grow up with more, and I guess I could have helped more. Update. Thank you for the advice. I really appreciate everything everyone had to say. First, I want to set something straight. I never let my sister hurt my kids like some of y'all think. The low contact was for my niece, and that's all it was. When birthdays were coming up, we would talk about birthdays or holidays. The conversation would consist of when I would pick up my niece, let's call her Emily, how long I would keep her, and when I would drop her off back home. My sister never kept my kids, never been to my house, and never talked to them without me or my husband present. Now another reason for the civil relationship with my sister is because Emily and my 2nd son, let's call him Justin, went to the same school. So any type of school event that was going on, my sister was there. My kids and niece had a good relationship before the car situation. Justin and Emily had a close relationship, and Emily and Luke had a friendly relationship. I always made sure my kids were happy where my sister was in their life, which is basically non-existent except for some school events and some big family get-together. Update. 2 days after Emily's call, I decided to call her to meet up with her. We decided to meet at a park that's a few minutes away from my home. When we met, Emily seemed normal but a little bit tired. I told her I didn't mean to hurt her in any way, but she needs to understand it's not my job because I'm not her parent. She said she understood that, but she was jealous that her brother, Luke, and Justin got everything that they wanted. I told her that first, Luke isn't her brother but a cousin. Second of all, they don't get everything they want. They work for it. They get good grades, do chores, stay out of trouble for the most part. I then asked her the real reason for why she was acting this way, that she never had a problem before this. She then started crying, saying it wasn't fair that Luke and Justin get everything they want while she gets barely anything. That Luke lucked out in life by being adopted by my husband, and that she deserves to have what my sons have. That she is my family, so I have to take care of her too. I told that she is part of my family but not my child, that I do love her but she's not my responsibility. I then asked her why she feels so strongly about it. She said that even though her parents do take good care of her, she feels like she's just an obligation to them. When she sees how Luke and Justin were raised, she gets jealous because in her eyes we don't look at the boys as an obligation, that we are a family that's always together and always works through problems and helps each other. That even though I stayed in her life and took her out with my family, she always felt jealous that she had to be that one to leave, that she felt second place. And since I took in Luke, I should take her in with no problem. I told her that while I understand her feelings, I'm not going to treat her as my kid. I didn't raise her, but I do love her. That it's her parents' job to get her a car or to help her get one. Then she got more upset, saying that I clearly don't care about her, and she left. I texted her saying that I do care for her, but I'm not her mom and it's not my job. After I got home, my husband and I talked, and we decided to call my sister. I told her that my family and I are going full no contact. My sister then asked about how I'm going to get in contact with Emily. I told her Emily is almost an adult, she can contact me if she wants. She then asked me if I was going to get Emily a car. I said no. I told her that it's her job, that she's her mother and needs to act like it. Emily needs her to be a mom, and hung up the phone, blocked and deleted her number. The next day I got a call from my mom. She believes that I should give Emily some money for a car if I won't give her one. I told I wasn't going to do that and hung up because all it's going to do is cause a fight. I then called Dad and explained everything, and he thinks I'm right. Then my dad called asking if he could come over on Wednesday. When he showed up, he was visibly upset. Mom gave a big chunk of money out of my parents' retirement fund to my sister. This has caused my parents to have a huge fight, which led my dad to and staying in a motel for a bit. Now I'm no contact with my sister and mom. I'll be going low contact with my niece for now. Thank you again for the advice that everyone had given me. Update 2. About a week after the post, I decided to talk to Emily. We decided to meet at my home. I asked everyone not to be home because I wanted her and I to talk privately. When she showed up, she didn't really want to look at me, and I asked her if I could give her a hug. She nodded her head, and the minute I hugged her, she cried. She said she was sorry for how she acted, and I told her she didn't need to apologize. I asked her about how her parents treat her again to understand more about what's going on. She told me that her dad treats her well, and he tries to spend time with her, but he's busy because he works 2 jobs. While my sister is home more, she usually just keeps to herself and doesn't really like to be bugged. I then asked her if she feels like she's been neglected. She said no, just sometimes they don't have family time that much because her parents argue a lot, especially about money. That sometimes her mom does make her feel like an obligation, but she knows that they do love her. I then asked her about the money my mom took from the retirement fund. She said that she and my sister were going car shopping soon. I then brought up her calling Luke her brother, and if she feels that way about him. She said she sees him like a cousin, and she thought if she played the brother card I would feel inclined to help her. She then explained that even though they are biologically siblings, they are cousins, and will always be cousins. I then asked her if she knew how I ended up adopting Luke. She said that she knew and her dad had explained what they did. Apparently my sister sugarcoated it while her dad told her the blunt truth, and it was the complete truth that he told her. Luke only sees her as a cousin also. Luke only has one sibling, and that's Justin. I then spoke to her about seeing a therapist that we would pay for. My husband agreed. She said she would think about it. I then asked her if she would like to do a fun day out with me on Saturdays. She got excited and said she would really like that. So that weekend we went on our first day out. We went to this restaurant that she's been wanting to try. We had a good time. I then took her to a bookstore, because she loves to read, and I bought her a couple of books that she's been wanting. When Emily and I were supposed to have our second weekend out, I had to cancel, because Justin ended up in the hospital. While at football practice he started wheezing a little bit, and he took his inhaler but didn't wait the appropriate time. He then got tackled, which knocked the wind out of him, and caused him to have a bad asthma attack. This happened on a Friday and Justin stayed at the hospital till Sunday. Emily and I were supposed to go out Saturday, and that morning I called her, and told I had to cancel before I could tell her why. She started yelling at me saying I never cared about her and hung up the phone. I tried calling her back but it went straight to voicemail. Then I sent her a text saying that I didn't mean to hurt her but Justin was in the hospital and that we can have our day next weekend. I never heard back from her. I gave up on reaching out to her after a couple of days. 2 days ago, my family and I were out for a family night when my neighbors called saying that they called the cops because someone was vandalizing one of our cars. When we got home, the cops were there, and it was Justin's car. The car had scratches, little dents, and paint. There are 2 broken windows. My husband and I checked our security footage. You could clearly see Emily and someone else vandalizing the car. My husband gave the video copy to the police and Emily and her friend got arrested next morning. My sister and mom came to my house screaming that I was ruining my niece's life, and if I loved her I would drop the charges. My husband has admitted that we don't drop the charges and Justin and Luke agree with my husband. A lot of people have asked Luke's view on everything, so I decided to talk to him. He said he's over everything, and it's best to cut contact with everyone, even Emily, because she's just like her mom. So we are cutting contact with everyone except for my dad. Future cuts my insulin pump thinking it was headphones to prove a point. This happened when I was in middle school, back in the days of wired headphones, so about 2011 or something. I've 24M currently, been a type 1 diabetic since I was about 4 years old, and I use a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. I had an EP, so all my teachers were told about it, and that I would need my insulin pump in class, that it might make noise and I might have to pull it out of my pocket and mess with it if I needed insulin, or I might need to drink a juice pouch, and I was able to do so at my discretion. We had one teacher who was a complete hard SS for no reason. She was notorious for making kids cry during presentations. She even told one girl who wanted to be a doctor to find a cure for cancer, because her little sister had childhood cancer, that she would need to actually be smart to do that, while chuckling to herself. Let a kid dream, man. We were like 12 years old. As you can imagine, she was also at war with technology. And on a side note, these days I use my phone to check my glucose and give myself an insulin bolus. I can't imagine being a kid today and dealing with a teacher like that, when the lines are blurred and your smartphone actually is a life-saving medical device. But anyway, if you're not familiar with insulin pumps, the kind I use has a little tube that connects the pump which has the insulin to my body which needs the insulin. This teacher also liked to be weirdly obtuse about things. Instead of being like other teachers and simply saying something like no cell phones in class, put it on my desk, which would allow me to remind them it's an insulin pump, and they'd usually say something like, that's right, my bad. She would instead try and talk abstractly about what she wanted to happen while walking around the room. So this particular day she kept alluding to students listening to music in class, that you should be careful what you do because she can see it. That us kids think we're so sneaky, but the adults know what we're up to. I obviously wasn't listening to music, so I figured she'd seen someone with headphones in the room, and the next thing I know she had snuck up behind me with scissors. It took me a good moment to realize what exactly had happened, because I was astonished. I was used to teachers thinking I had a cell phone or getting upset about my pump beeping during an exam, but no one had ever touched it before, much less cut my life-sustaining tube. I was actually sitting with my mouth agape, and she turned to me now that she was at the front of the class again, and said something along the lines of, Mr. Wonderelli, care to share what tunes are more important than listening to class? I'd at this point put together that she thought I was listening to music. She thought she cut my headphone wires. I replied, just the sound of my thoughts while I've still got any. Since that was my insulin pump, she had to let me go to my locker to get my cell phone to call my mom to bring me a new infusion set. My parents insisted no cell phones until high school, but my mom was also scared with me being T1D and too dyslexic to remember a phone number and wanted me to easily be able to call her, so she got me a $15 Walmart phone and put minutes on it. And now I feel old. Then I just waited in the front office for her. She worked from home and drove like a bat out of HLL. She was so angry. I don't ever want to see her that angry again in my life. It took 10 years off of me and I wasn't even in trouble. The teacher had apologies to me and all the teachers got some more disability accommodation training or something. Kinda anticlimactic end. But a friend thought it was entertaining and that I should share. Edit, I'm going to put some of my comments here so no one has to dig if you want more information. Yes, she knew I had a pump. I had an EP and my teachers were given the information they needed to know about my diabetes. Even still, a lot of non-diabetics just don't get it, or they forget. It would happen a lot and teachers would ask for my phone if they saw me messing with it under the desk. Really, I was going through a thing and embarrassed about being diabetic, so I would often try and hide it, so I get how they thought I had a phone. But a simple reminder it's a pump was enough for every other teacher. Yes, she did get really close to me. I was facing the front of the room to look at the projector screen and to take notes. She snuck up behind me from the back of the room where she was lecturing at us from, and reached her arm down towards me with the scissors. I didn't notice her doing that. Kids used to keep their iPod or whatever in their pocket, and then run their headphones up under their shirt. It sometimes left a little bit of the wire peeking out from their pocket to get to their shirt. That's where she cut the pump, was down at my waist. In terms of her apology, it wasn't too bad. We had a meeting with her, the principal, assistant principal, and a lady from the special education office, plus me and my parents. She said she was sorry for her actions, and that she shouldn't have treated me that way, and she hopes I don't grow up to expect people to act like that towards me. She forgot I had a pump, but I didn't feel like she was making an excuse. She was saying she should have been more mindful, and it was her fault, and that I did nothing wrong. She also said I was brave and calm in the face of adversity, stuff like that. And then she apologized to my mom and dad for frightening them and for any costs. She offered to pay for it, but they declined. They wanted all the teachers to get more education about kids with diabetes, and the school had like a nurse diabetes educator, or someone come in to talk to the teachers. No, my parents didn't sue her or the school. No, she wasn't fired. Yes, I still had to be in her class. And yes, I did have extra supplies kept in the nurse's office, but I also just really wanted my mom in that moment, because I was a kid. This was a tiny school, and did a lot of backwards things. They mishandled my learning disability as well. And one year one of my teachers was surprised my dad has mild cerebral palsy and thought it must be so tough for me having to deal with that. And would talk to him like he was 5 during student-teacher conferences. He's an engineer. Eat it too. When my mom showed up, I was sitting in the office waiting for her. I think it took her like 15 minutes to get their post-phone call. She asked me if I was okay, and checked out the damage that was done. I could tell she was mad. Not with me, obviously. She walked straight up to the receptionist and just asked where the teacher was, and they phoned the classroom and had my teacher come to the office. The principal also came out. My mom ripped her a new one. But she didn't yell. Though I honestly think that made it more terrifying that she was very collected. I don't remember word for word, but basically she said that removing my insulin pump was a violation of my YAP, not to mention that it is a medical device and an extension of my body, which is keeping me alive, and that she would have the audacity to damage life-saving medical equipment was reckless and criminal. That type 1 diabetes is no joke and takes lives. That she should count herself lucky she didn't damage the pump itself, and she let her know how expensive they are and everything they had to do to get me one. She's had years of practice having to argue to take food into places they don't let you take outside food or in the airport, that I can't take my pump through scanners. She was very practiced at putting the fear of God into people, but in a way that they can't turn it on her and say she's being disruptive. Then she took me home for the rest of that day.